The early morning calm at the Secret Service headquarters was shattered by an unanticipated disturbance. The hum of routine security checks, hushed conversations, and the rhythmic clatter of keyboards were all disrupted when a motorcade, sleek and without prior notice, pulled up to the main entrance. The former president of the United States, Donald Trump, had arrived, and no one had any idea why. The air inside the building instantly became electric with tension. Agents exchanged uncertain glances as the black SUVs settled in place. The absence of press, cameras, or any official entourage deepened the mystery. This was not a scheduled meeting. No memos had been issued, no protocols arranged. Something about the visit felt off. As the doors to the first vehicle swung open, Trump emerged, his unmistakable silhouette cutting through the morning light. His expression was unreadable, his stride deliberate. A few close aides trailed behind him, their faces just as tight-lipped. The usual fanfare that accompanied his public appearances was missing. This was different. "What's he doing here?" a security officer murmured to a colleague. "No clue. But I don't like surprises," came the hushed response. Trump moved with an unusual urgency. He strode past security checkpoints, his presence alone rendering traditional clearance procedures obsolete. The agents hesitated, but none dared to stop him. They merely watched as he bypassed usual routes and took an unexpected turn down a restricted corridor. Alarm bells, both literal and figurative, began ringing in the minds of the personnel present. That hallway led to one of the most secured areas in the building, the tactical training facility. It was off limits to visitors, even former presidents. One of the senior agents, a broad-shouldered man with years of experience, finally stepped forward. "Sir, that area is restricted," he said, voice steady but firm. Trump did not slow down. He pushed open the heavy steel door and stepped inside. Inside the tactical training facility, the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and sweat. High-ranking instructors were in the midst of their rigorous training exercises, their focus momentarily shattered by the unexpected guest. A few trainees froze mid-drill, staring in disbelief. "What the hell is he doing here?" one of them muttered under his breath. Trump, ever the master of commanding a room, walked to the center of the facility, his eyes scanning the equipment and training areas. When he finally spoke, his words sent a fresh wave of unease through the onlookers. "Let's see what you've got." Silence blanketed the room. Instructors exchanged uncertain glances. This had to be some kind of joke, a stunt, or a test. But Trump wasn't smiling. The lead instructor, a battle-hardened veteran with a scar above his left eye, stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, this is a live drill facility. It's not a demonstration arena." Trump met his gaze without flinching. "I know exactly what it is." Then, in a move that left even the most seasoned agent stunned, he shrugged off his jacket, loosened his tie, and stepped onto the mat. The instructor hesitated. "Mr. President, this isn't a game." Trump smirked. "Neither is the job you do." The tension in the room thickened as the instructor assessed him. This wasn't part of any known protocol. But Trump wasn't backing down. Reluctantly, the instructor stepped onto the mat. "All right, sir. I'll go easy." Trump shook his head. "Don't." The next moments played out like a scene from an action thriller. The instructor moved first, executing a swift maneuver designed to neutralize an opponent quickly. Trump countered, not with the finesse of a trained fighter, but with a surprising instinctiveness that caught even the seasoned instructor off guard. Murmurs rippled through the room. Did he just... No way. The instructor regrouped, this time advancing with calculated force. Again, Trump held his ground, his movements unexpectedly effective. It wasn't refined, but it worked. And then, in a moment no one saw coming, Trump executed a controlled takedown that sent the instructor sprawling onto the mat. Silence. Stunned faces all around. The instructor, still on the mat, looked up at him, a mixture of confusion and respect flickering in his eyes. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Trump adjusted his cuffs, his smirk returning. Let's just say I've been around. Little did anyone know, this incident was not confined to the training facility. In a surveillance room down the hall, high-ranking officials watched the entire encounter in real time, their expressions grim. A senior director leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the screen. "We need to talk to him." A young analyst, flipping through security reports, suddenly froze. "Sir," she said, her voice tinged with unease. "We have a file." The director turned to her. "On what?" She hesitated, then pushed forward a document stamped with multiple security classifications. A reference to Moscow, 1987, stood out like a warning beacon. "Why would a real estate mogul have classified surveillance logs from Moscow?" she murmured. The director didn't respond immediately. He simply exhaled, his eyes narrowing. "I don't know," he finally said, "but I intend to find out." Meanwhile, as Trump walked out of the facility, his expression remained unreadable. He had left behind more than just a bewildered group of Secret Service agents. He had left behind a question mark, one that was about to send ripples through the highest levels of government. The shock of what had just transpired in the Secret Service's tactical training facility had barely settled when the senior director ordered an immediate closed-door debriefing. Surveillance footage of Trump's unexpected visit was being analyzed from multiple angles, every movement scrutinized. The young analyst who had discovered the Moscow 1987 reference had already been called into the briefing room. Her heart pounded as she laid the document on the table. The room was silent as the director opened the folder, his eyes scanning the contents. "What exactly are we looking at?" the director asked. The analyst cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "This document references a highly classified surveillance operation conducted in Moscow in 1987. The subject of interest was a U.S. businessman who had attracted unusual attention from both American and Soviet intelligence agencies." The room remained still as the implications sank in. One of the agents leaned forward. "You're telling me Donald Trump was under surveillance in Moscow decades before he entered politics?" The analyst nodded. "Not only that, there are indications that he had meetings with individuals connected to the KGB. The exact details remain redacted." The director exhaled, tapping a finger against the table. "This doesn't leave this room. We need to confirm what exactly happened back then before we even think about involving the higher-ups." Meanwhile, Trump had returned to his estate, his mind replaying the day's events. He had expected resistance when he entered the training facility, but the reactions had been even more intense than he anticipated. He knew what was coming. The agencies would be in chaos, questioning, analyzing, and trying to fit the puzzle pieces together. He smirked. That was exactly what he wanted. Back at Secret Service headquarters, the intelligence community was already buzzing with speculation. Agents whispered in corridors. The director had called an emergency meeting with a select few individuals who had access to high-level classified materials. The surveillance footage of Trump's impromptu display of combat ability was being reviewed repeatedly. One of the senior operatives turned to his colleague, his voice low. "Did you see the way he moved? That wasn't just instinct. That was trained reflex." "You're saying he's been trained?" another agent asked, skeptical. The first operative nodded. "Not in a traditional military sense, maybe. But there's no way a real estate mogul with no combat experience could have done what he did in that facility." The director was already thinking several steps ahead. If Trump had acquired training, where had he received it? And more importantly, who trained him? The following morning, the director made a call. Within hours, a meeting was arranged with a former CIA operative who had been active in Moscow during the late 1980s. He was one of the few who might have insight into what had transpired back then. The man, now retired but still sharp as ever, leaned back in his chair as he listened to the director's questions. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of years spent in the shadows of geopolitics. "You want to know about Trump in Moscow?" he said with a chuckle. "I can tell you this. Back in those days, the KGB didn't just observe people like him. They tested them. The director's brow furrowed. Tested them how? The former operative smiled knowingly. Let's just say they had ways of seeing what a man was capable of. If Trump caught their interest, it means he demonstrated something they found useful. A heavy silence filled the room. You think he was recruited? The director asked, his voice quiet. The ex-operative shook his head. Not necessarily. But let's just say, if he walked into your training facility yesterday and shocked your agents, it wouldn't be the first time he surprised people in high places. As the days passed, questions continued to mount. High-ranking officials debated what to do next. One thing was certain. Trump's unexpected visit had set off a chain reaction that no one saw coming. The director sat in his office, staring at the classified document on his desk. The surveillance logs, the Moscow reference, the training facility incident, it all pointed to one unsettling truth. Donald Trump knew something they didn't, and whatever it was powerful enough to send shockwaves through the most secure agencies in the world. Conclusion: the unfinished puzzle. As Trump went about his business, unbothered by the storm he had left in his wake, intelligence agencies scrambled to piece together the truth. Speculation ran wild, but hard evidence remained elusive. In the highest levels of government, classified meetings were held behind closed doors. Analysts worked around the clock, poring over decades-old documents, trying to connect us that had remained unlinked for years. Why had Trump's visit to the training facility triggered such alarm? Why was his past in Moscow so carefully obscured? What had he learned? Or more importantly, what had he done during that time? There was no denying it now. Trump wasn't just a businessman, a television personality, or even a former president. There was another layer to him. Something buried beneath years of speculation and secrecy. Something that made powerful men in powerful rooms nervous. The deeper intelligence agencies dug, the more questions arose. Could Trump's connections from decades ago have influenced global events in ways no one had realized? If he had been exposed to elite training or high-level intelligence tactics, why had it never surfaced until now? Had he been playing a long game all along? One that stretched beyond politics, beyond business, beyond anything anyone had ever suspected? One theory emerged that unsettled even the most hardened intelligence operatives. What if Trump's unpredictability wasn't a flaw, but a calculated advantage? What if, while the world dismissed him as brash and impulsive, he was operating on knowledge that had been buried deep, hidden from public view? Meanwhile, as the agencies raced against time, Trump remained as he always had, unpredictable. He played golf, held meetings, and carried on as if nothing had happened. But behind that trademark smirk was a man who knew the game better than most. He had played it for years, and he had just reminded the world that power wasn't just about wealth or politics. It was about knowledge. Information was the ultimate weapon, and Donald Trump had just proven that he held a piece of the puzzle no one else could see. The question now was, what was he going to do with it? And more importantly, who else had been watching all along? Somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes had observed every move, every revelation. The ripples of Trump's actions had reached far beyond Washington, beyond the intelligence agencies, and into places that had long remained hidden from public view. There were those who had been waiting for this moment. And now, as the world's most powerful players scrambled to make sense of it all, a new chapter was about to begin, one that only a select few had the knowledge to understand. The world operates on secrets, and some pieces of history never fit neatly into place. The unfinished puzzle represents the mysteries that linger just beyond reach, hidden truths, untold stories, and unseen forces shaping events from the shadows. Whether in politics, intelligence, or personal lives, knowledge is the ultimate weapon, wielded by those who understand its power. But what happens when a single missing piece changes everything? The deeper one digs, the more questions arise, and the lines between coincidence and conspiracy blur. In the end, the most powerful players aren't those in the spotlight. They're the ones rewriting the rules.